Good morning. We will pay attention to bad debts and provision for bad debts today. If we look at the trial balance, we see that there's a balance for provision for bad debts for 700 Rand that was created the previous year. The allowance for credit losses or provision for bad debts balance remains in the books from 1 year end to the next year end. So only at the end of the financial year do we adjust this figure to the figure that we think that we can lose in the future. The bad debts that was actually written off during this year was 980. So at the end of the financial year, they say that we receive 500 Rand from P Stock as a final payment of 40 cents in the Rand. The rest of the amount must be written off as bad debts. Now, if we look at this, the amount received is given, not the debt. So it means that the debt is 100%. The amount that we receive is 40% of it, and the bad debts will be 60%. Then the amount received was given, so that means that figure is given as 500. If I want to calculate the bad debts, it will be 60, the one that we want, over 40 that was given to me, times 500, and that will give me 750 Rand. So the bad debts will be written off as 750. The amount that we receive, bank will be debited with 500, and the debtors control will be credited with both the figures. If we look at the second entry, they say issue a receipt as a final payment of 40 cents in the Rand to settle his debt of 500. So now they don't give us the amount received, they give us the debt. So the debt is still 100%. The amount that we receive is 40% of the total debt, and the bad debts that must be written off will be 60% of the total debt. In this case, they gave us the total debt, so next to debt, I must say that the debt is 500 Rand. If I want to know the bad debts here, the one that I want, 60, over the one that we know, 100, times 500, and that will give me the total of 300 Rand. So bad debts will be written off at 300. The bank will increase with 200, and the debtors will decrease with both those figures. If we look at the provision for bad debts, the balance that we have in the provision for bad debts account is 700. So it means that we've got a balance at the moment of 700 Rand, and we have to adjust that balance to 850. So it means that we have to increase it from 700 to 850. So the balance will have to be credited with an additional 150 Rand to increase it. So provision for bad debts adjustment will be debited with 150, and the provision for bad debts will be credited with 150. We will start our ledger with the balance provided for debtors control and the balance provided for the bad debts that was given as 980 Rand. And then we will do the provision for bad debts as well. On this page, we will show that the bank received 500 Rand, so the debtors is decreased with 500. Bank is increased with 500. Bad debts is increased with 750 to increase the expense. The debtors is decreased with 750. For the money received, the debtors is decreased with 200. The bank is increased with 200. For the bad debts, the debtors reduced with 300, and the bad debts expense increases with 300. If we look at the provision for bad debts account, they gave us a balance of 700 that was created at the end of the previous year. this amount must be increased to 850. So we want a new balance that must be 850. The provision for bad debts adjustment will then be debited with the difference between the 700 and the 850. So provision for bad debts will be credited with 150, and the provision for bad debts adjustment will be debited with 150. So if we created a provision for bad debts in the past, we will always only show the movement between the previous year and the current year, and that movement, so the difference between the opening balance and the closing balance, is the amount that will go to your provision for bad debts adjustment. What did we learn today? When a customer is insolvent, only a percentage of his debt will be obtained. You will not receive the full debt. You have to determine whether the amount received is given or whether the outstanding debt is given. Because as I showed you in this example, that the calculation will be done totally different depending on whether the amount received or the outstanding debt is given. If we look at the calculation again, the debt is 100, the receive is 40, so it means 60% will be written off as bad debts. In the first example, they told us how much money did we receive? 500 Rand. So if we wanted to calculate the bad debts there, because the receive amount was given, we will take the 500, multiply with the 60, the one that I want to know, over the 40 that is known to us. If we look at the second example, the debt is still 100%, receive 40, bad debt 60. But now the amount that they owe, outstanding amount, is given as 500. So if I want to work out what is the bad debts, I will say the one that we want is 60. The percentage that's known is 100. So it means it is 300 Rand. So it's very important to read very carefully what is the information given so that you don't use the wrong calculation. When the provision for bad debts increase, the provision for bad debts adjustment account will be debited to create an expense. The expense will be transferred to the profit and loss to reduce the profit of the business. The provision for bad debts account will be credited because the amount must increase to the new balance. When the provision for bad debts must decrease, the provision for bad debts adjustment will be credited to create an income, and then the provision for bad debts is debited to reduce the old balance to the new balance. The provision for bad debts balance, the final balance, is the figure that will be recorded in the balance sheet.